About 1,000 years after Abraham, a man named David, the same David who fought against Goliath, a man named David sat in his palace. He'd become a king, and upon becoming king, he looked around his kingdom and thought about what could he do for God. One of the things that he realized was that the Ark of the Covenant, this symbol that represented God's presence in the midst of his people, that this Ark was in a tent. Here was David living in a palace, and the Ark was in a tent. And so he turns to one of the prophets, and he says that he wants to build a house. He wants to build a temple for God, a place where the Ark can be permanently. The prophet says, do it. Do everything that you desire for God. And so David gets ready. But later on, the prophet receives a message from God saying, no, in fact, God doesn't want that house. At least, he doesn't want David to make that house. David's son Solomon would be the one who made it. But there was more to the message. The prophet comes to David and says, you're not going to make the house. Your son will. And God will make you a house. In fact, he says, God isn't just going to make you a house, he's going to make you a family. Just like the promise made to Abraham had to do with his descendants, David is now given a similar promise, but it was about his descendants and the throne, not the land this time, not blessing the world, but the throne of the kingdom. David was told that he would have a son who would sit on his throne. And interestingly enough, this son wouldn't just reign over the kingdom of David, but he would reign forever on David's throne. He would build a house for God, and he would be God's son. David is astonished with this promise. And yet, what about the promise to Abraham? In some ways, it was fulfilled because here was David, a descendant of Abraham, and he was there in the land. And he ruled over that land. But in other ways, it still hadn't been fulfilled. What about the blessing on the world? So David was given promises, and just like those promises that Abraham was given, he had to wait. Wait to see when that fulfillment would happen. And what we're going to see as we proceed is that, in fact, those promises to Abraham and those promises to David find their fulfillment in one person. And that person would come another 1,000 years later and would be the Lord Jesus Christ.